This is a town hall that we've gotten started about broadband access and the future of broadband going forward in Missouri, but not only for just schools and businesses, but also for our HBCUs as well. We know that Harris Stowe is one of the only HBCUs in the St. Louis region, which is the only one in the St. Louis region, but one of two in the state of Missouri. And the access to internet, Wi-Fi, it's really demanding for us to move forward as far as businesses goes, but education as well. We know that the cornerstone of business, and Harris Stowe has been able to do this completely well, is have partnerships with major organizations such as Wells Fargo for the Business Center and the World Trading Center that you all have in your main building. And we know that you need quality access to broadband and Wi-Fi in order for that to be a success and in future for expansion. So I will let Representative Riggs say his hellos, and we will start to take questions and dive into a little bit about the future of broadband.
Thank you, Representative Bosley. Can everybody hear me? I just have to ask that question. I teach, so yeah, make sure we're getting through. I just want to thank Representative Bosley for introducing me to the Harris Stowe community. This started in 2019, and we're both on budget. And she came up to my district and introduced her to some of my farmers and our ag folks up there. And she introduced me to Harris Stowe, who incidentally we play. So you're part of our conference. I had not been here before. I've been back several times since. I appreciate the use of facilities today, the ability to come down here and talk about this, but also what Harris Stowe brings to this conversation as we talk about broadband across the state. And with the announcement from NTIA that funds are going to be made available to the HBCUs, in particular in Missouri, it'd be Lincoln and Jefferson City, Harris Stowe here in St. Louis. We're looking at a potential game changer for what we talk about in terms of digital access in the St. Louis region. So we talk in the Broadband Interim Committee about a number of things. The first we talk about is access. The second we talk about is speed. The third thing we talk about is affordability. And a lot of times we have deserts out there where quote unquote the access is okay. The problem is the affordability. Speed sort of a constant across the state. It's a problem. At one point we were ranked 49th in the country out of 50 states. Montana was worse. Still is to my knowledge. And I'm not sure where we are in the rankings. We've improved somewhat, but it's been a real problem at the statewide level dealing with broadband because it's not regulated as utility. No one wants it to be regulated as utility. We do have a state broadband office. We have a state broadband fund. The office is at this moment is one person named Tim Arbeiter. He does a tremendous job. He needs help. We don't have a really good handle on maps in this state. Most states don't. The FCC at the federal level has maps. I was able to sit down and talk with one of their commissioners within the last 2 weeks. Would have loved to have something done October this year. It didn't happen. He said best case early 2022, maybe February into March. But we know at the statewide level, we've got a statewide broadband director who answers the phone. People asking where their internet is. So we need to do a much better job of getting the word out there exactly where things are. And we also have a different conversation, and I've been all over the state. We're going to do this again in Poplar Bluff this coming Monday. We've got one coming up at Echo Bluff State Park. In October, we'll go back and take testimony in Jefferson City, October 18th. The conversations are similar, yet different. So we had a town hall in Kansas City at Independence, and we heard from a variety of speakers who talked about digital literacy. And we had never had a statewide conversation about that, what it even meant. And what we found out was folks like Goodwill Industries have gone out literally with dedicated vehicles that are Wi-Fi hotspots. They go out and they talk to folks, literally are going door to door to sign people up for training so they know how to put together an email address, how they basically can bookmark a page to go back to, say, an Indeed. And this is all about workforce development. And when I don't know what the percentage, I assume it's over 90% of your jobs now are available online, and you don't have the ability to give yourself an email address. This is something we assume this is happening. It isn't. And we're talking thousands of people in a metropolitan area. And I'm sure the issue is similar here. It means something as well for our seniors who don't have a lot of computer literacy. They think broadband is an email address and following grandkids on Facebook. It's a lot more than that. Now it's Zoom, and we're seeing 1,500 to 1,800% increase in online visits, basically telehealth resources. And folks don't have the capability of signing in. They're not going to access their doctor. They're still going to go to wherever. It's an issue in terms of sickness. And this isn't just COVID. This is any cold or flu season. It's also an issue for transportation. Folks don't always have the ability to get from point A to point B when they absolutely need it. The buses don't always run there. The train doesn't always go there. The Oats bus doesn't always go there on the date you're scheduled. And that's a problem for access for, again, hundreds of thousands of people across the state. So when we talk about these conversations, we go out these town halls basically to gather facts. And what we try to do is wrap our heads around how big this problem is, ways to get there, and the legislative steps we're going to have to take in order to accomplish our goals. And I'll just tell you all point blank, 2022 is the year, period. And the game changer for that has been the federal funds that are flowing towards the state. Governor Parson announced here within the last month, he's going to ask the General Assembly for a little over $400 million to go into the state broadband fund. That is incredibly significant because the state broadband fund has a 7-to-1 return on investment ratio. For every dollar that is put in, $7 of follow-on capital come in behind it. And that's something we have a demonstrated track record. We have a really good challenge process. We want competition, but we don't want people to overbuild other people. And we have a state, we call it basically a hierarchy of needs. The folks who are unserved have 10-1 or less, underserved 25-3 or less, other have decent internet. And we want to reach the folks first who don't have it at all. And we did a town hall in Florissant. I was shocked to hear that 25% of the people in Florissant, in a suburb, do not have sufficient access. The issue there is affordability. It's not the fact there aren't providers, they're there. It's just the cost associated with it. So we're looking at emergency broadband funds with an 11% usage rate, I think was the last I saw. So 1 out of 10 people who are eligible for it have used it. It's a pretty simple formula, free or reduced lunch, you're in. It's that simple. The problem is we haven't publicized it as well as we could. I've asked, providers, show me your marketing materials. What are you guys doing to get this out there where folks understand it's available? One of the problems we've seen with that is the folks who have it available, they're in a hotspot situation where they don't have enough cell phone signal to activate the hotspot. So the deeper we dig, the more we find, the more we need to look at. And from a appropriator standpoint, Representative Bosley sits on House budget. They will hear this in painstaking detail. They'll hear a lot of things coming up in January. I'm actually going to be testifying here, I believe the 29th, before the subcommittee within House budget that is looking now at the federal dollars with respect to what our committee has done. Our speaker basically gave us a very simple charge: go out and find out as much as you possibly can, put together a report that makes sense, that people can read, and we can turn into legislative action. So those are some of the principles we're trying to get at here. Thank everybody for coming out on a Friday afternoon. It's a great day to be a Cardinal fan. Just want to get that out there. And I also wanted to recommend some outside reading for those of you who enjoy this kind of thing. McKinsey Company just came out with something here at the end of July. It's a good article. It's about 15-page. How HBCUs can accelerate economic mobility. And I look at Harris Stowe, and I know the track record here with STEM. I know the track record with workforce development. I know the track record with adult learners. And I also know from teaching adult learners the last 15 years, you've got to have a substantial online presence or you're not meeting these students where they are. and they go to school now all year round. It's the old 4-year model where you drop in, you drop out, you take summers off to make some money to buy pizza, are dead. It's not happening. A lot of schools now, they accelerated the timetable. You're out in 3 with free community college, lots of places with A+ programs. They've accelerated even more. So it's something where we as a state need to be ahead of the curve. I always say you can ride the wave or you can be crushed by it. We need to ride that wave. And that's something Harris Stowe does exceptionally well. Honored to be part of the process basically to get the statewide STEM designation for under-resourced, underrepresented students, because I know what your track record here is. And I know how much this institution has played a part in St. Louis and its economic vitality, and how much more it's going to do with these additional funds coming down from the federal government. So with that, I'll turn it back to Representative Bosley, and I'll just shut up for a minute.
Oh, no, don't shut up. That was super informative, greatly appreciated. And outside of that article, there was Phillips County Focus had an article as well online where it broke down literally what we were going to be doing with the National Telecommunication Information Administrations, which is the NTIA, or as they call it, NETI. I think that's what they call it. I'm not very good with acronym names. But the Broadband Infrastructure Program, right now, our department, the Department of Economic Development, is taking applications for that. We're requesting about 5 to 30 million, if I'm correct, in the federal funding to be awarded to those companies to bring broadband here. And as Representative Riggs said, it's important for us to visit each other's district, because we've noticed and we realize there is no real divide between rural and urban areas, especially when it comes to infrastructure and broadband. In North St. Louis City, we do not have the same access, quality, or can afford it, the same Wi-Fi broadband access either, especially during right now in a pandemic. We are seeing an influx of people going to our libraries to get those hotspots. And even when they have those hotspots to do their homework or to even just work from home, those hotspots are going out immediately. It takes about a week for them to run through all of the service, or I think it's called the band wire, what is it?
I just call it activation.
Activation, thank you. I want to make sure I say this correctly. It takes them about a week to run through the activation of that hotspot. Now, if I'm somebody who has 2 jobs potentially and maybe 1 child, and a father or a single mother or a single father at home, I can't run back and forth often to the library to renew the activation for my hotspot. I need that to be at home, access, ready to go. I know that there is Charter has been working diligently within those underserved areas to be able to obtain some type of quality and affordable access for that, where they have the underserved program where you can apply for a cheaper access for their broadband coverage. And in that, the application process has started July 26th. Now, I don't know if it's ended as of yet. I don't believe it has, but in the Department of Economic Development, we know that you can go in right now as a company to be able to bid for that 5 to 30 million to be able to bring access to the underserved areas. Now, if you are working, and as Harris Stowe has been with the National Geospatial Agency, NGA, that in itself is a very good and very lucrative program to be having access in, because now you're bringing the federal spy is what they want to say it. You're bringing in that agency within that program. So now not only are we giving access to our federal departments and our federal partners, but we're also giving that access to those in that community as well. The governor has made it very clear, as Representative Riggs has already stated, that this is a top priority for them. In the infrastructure bill that has just passed, we know that there's going to be more money coming down. This is not just the end all be all with the 5 to 30 million. With the city of St. Louis, we're having over $500 million that is coming down the pipeline, where our mayor will allocate where those dollars come from the AARP fund, American Recovery Act. Yes, American Recovery Act. I always call it AARP, so forgive me for saying that acronym incorrectly. But in that fund, in that infrastructure fund, but also in the AARP, we know that we're going to have more dollars coming down that we'll be able to tear up. And we're seeing it on Highway 70 right now, where it's being repaved, but we'll also be able to get those streets down Jefferson, where we have a Delmar divide. We know that access and quality access on the south side of the city is more quality than it is in North City or in West St. Louis. So I often believe that we forget about West St. Louis when we have these conversations. West St. Louis, within that Delmar divide, everything north of Delmar, but that still includes the west side. Their access is not as qualified as you would go when you cross over to Pershing or when you cross over to Fairgrounds, Forest Park. Their access and quality to access is a lot more greater than you would have on your Theclas of the world, where my old alma mater actually sits, which is still in North City, but it's West North City, kind of in that realm of questioning. So in this town hall, what we're here to do is not only just give you access, but we want to hear from those providers. We want to hear from those in the community so that we'll know exactly what it is that we need to do moving forward on how we can bring that access, that qualified access to your communities, not for just your children, but for you, period. Because right now we're in a pandemic and you're working from home. Everybody's working from home. Everybody's learning from home. We're just now getting in person, but we need to hear what do we need to do and how can we bring that access to you and make sure that we're doing our due diligence and righteousness of you to make sure that you're getting it. I know that's long-winded to get back to the full circle of just saying, what can we do better? Where do we need to put the money? Because the money is here. The access is here. It is a priority for both Republican and Democrat. You have a Republican from rural Missouri and a Democrat from urban Missouri, North St. Louis, Hyde Park, sitting here today talking about the exact same things. This is what unity looks like. This is how we get change. So if we're going to get that change, we need to hear from you. Even you all online, please make sure you type in your questions, whatever questions that you may have that we can't answer, we'll get back to you. Our offices are very accessible to give you that information. You can Google us, go online, or you can just simply 573-751-6800, and Representative Riggs is 573.
751-3613.
Call us, give us that information, because we need to know how we can make this better. Thank you.
And to Representative Bosley's point, according to DESE, right now, 23% of all the school children K through 12 in the state of Missouri do not have 25/3 access. And they're not all rural kids. A lot of them are in our cities.
What is 25/3 access?
That's the state or the FCC standard, basically the minimum for high-speed internet. 10.1 is basically the old copper wire system. 25/3 is honest. We've got fiber going to your place, or we've got sufficient fixed wireless that we have enough power basically to take that signal down. And that's just unacceptable. We have to do a better job on that. Got the microphone down. We have the floor microphone.
Hi, my name is Dr. Martin Ferry. I'm a resident of the West End of St. Louis. And to your point, the question or the statement that you just made about there being this lack of access, and for the access that we have is really below par for our students. So right now we're in person, but of course, a lot of the learning is still happening after school hours. What's your plan to fix that big discrepancy?
Well, let's go ahead and start. One huge step we can take is using the existing funding that is there. And that's the EBB fund that the feds have basically stood up through the FCC. And those are monies that initially were COVID related. But as they roll that program out, they figured out, gee, this isn't just a COVID problem. This is a permanent problem. And in order to get at those, $30 to $50, depending on where you're at, to be able to apply for that. It's just the free and reduced lunch qualifies you. There are no major hoops to jump through. It's a pretty straightforward process, which is really unusual for the federal government, but this one they got right. The problem we've had so far is the access has been, the usage has not been where it needs to be. Basically, 1 out of 9 who are eligible for it have received it. We've got to do better than that. I've actually had talk with folks within the Department of Economic Development about how do we broadcast that better? How do people know it's out there? It's something where the providers are pitching in and have pledged to be able to help. It's also something that the school districts themselves can emphasize. And I'd say it's as simple as the book bag. And I had a son who brought the book bag home. He never emptied the book bag. Mom and dad had to empty the book bag. And I think that's where part of the problem is. We just haven't communicated as well as we could. So that's on us. But at the same time, if the feds go ahead and extend those funds out on a permanent basis, and all the indications are that they're going to do that, we basically need to keep that ball rolling in perpetuity. It's out there. Folks need to know it's there. We just need to let people know where it is. And to your point about the access, we've had cases where the students checked out the hotspot, but they couldn't activate it because they didn't have enough cell phone signal to make the thing work. So, you know, they bring the tablets out, folks bring the tablets home to school. We did the online learning, we flipped the switch. Well, the other thing we found out was that 45% of the bandwidth during the day, because the kids were out and the parents were out too, was being soaked up by 2 carriers. YouTube and Netflix. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, nobody. So now we know it's there. We know what the problems are, but we also know that the cell phone signal has to activate these hotspots. And if you're in an area that does not have good cell phone service, depending on who your carrier is, that's a problem. You might as well be on the dark side of the moon. And it's there, it's sitting there, you're looking at it, you've done all the things, it still doesn't work. And that's a real problem for a lot of folks.
I don't know if you all have ever driven down 40. I call it 64. It's so un-St. Louisan of me to call it 64. I know that. But if you've ever driven down 40 and 64, and you know, when you cross right over Hampton, your phone starts to black out, it's slow, it's not giving you great service. That's because you're transitioning into a high bandwidth access cell tower area. You're coming from somewhere that is extremely poor in quality and going somewhere where they literally have it blanketed over that area in Brentwood because AT&T sits right there. Have you all noticed that? That's the exact same thing. That's what he's talking about. Is cell service is terrible when you're in the city, North City's 6440, you coming just off Jefferson and Grand because it's right there within that divide as well. But as soon as you get right past Hampton, Clayton, your phone will just give you nothing for at least a short period of time where it'll drop a call on you because it's going into that 5GE service range where you have better wireless connection. You have better cell towers. So just keep that in mind, that is actively already happening. So you can see it visually, you're in your area everyday to-day life.
Next.
So Cindy had a question online. She said, who is the carrier supporting the library hotspots, or does the person checking out the hotspots have to have their own carrier? So that's a double-ended question. The carrier is within the library. The library has teamed up with their own, I believe it's Charter and Spectrum, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, but they have teamed up with those carriers and those providers in order to provide that. And if they check out, they only have a certain amount of bandwidth that they can use. And once they finish with that bandwidth, they have to come back and reload you have to check it back in and then check it back out in order to get more access. And like I said, they're running through that within a week because it's not just mom and dad on that little hotspot. The kids are on there too, trying to get their education. So it's going massively quick. So I don't know if that answers, it's very short because it's easy to say that, but even with those hotspots, that's not enough. That's a short-term fix. We need something that is actually within our fibers, changing our infrastructure in order for us to make this work.
If I could add to that point, we have a pilot program in the state through the Secretary of State's office. And we have, I believe it's almost 350 public libraries throughout the state of Missouri. We have 34 job centers. So the pilot is in two parts. The first basically is to set up an area where it's dedicated for proctored exams. So you have an industry certification, you studied for it. If you don't have good access at home, you can go to a library, you can log on, go through your whatever. I don't know how many times I've had people call me. They opened up a test, they're at home. I live in Hannibal, Missouri, right? The internet cuts out, they've opened the test. Oh, by the way, it's timed exercise. So they frantically get a hold of IT. What's going on? It's on your end. That's your problem. Literally drop what they're doing and drive if they can make it in time to the place where the exam's being taken. Not everybody has that luxury. So that's step one, is to equip our public libraries with more resources because they are community centers. Step two is to add HIPAA compliant areas within the public libraries. So folks who don't have the ability to get to their doctors at a distance have the ability to go to that library. And we have libraries in every county in the state. The second part of that, within that, is the mental health piece, because we have so many people out here today who are not accessing mental health resources at all, who should be, who need to be, but they're still afraid to walk through the door. And it's a true story. We had something called Mark Twain Behavioral Health in Hannibal on Broadway. Nobody went through the front door on Broadway because it's the busiest street in town. Mm-hmm. Everybody went to the parking lot out back. They went through the back door. There's still a stigma attached to mental illness, and it shouldn't be, but it is. So what's the stigma attached with going to a public library? Oh, you're trying to get smarter. There is no stigma attached to going to a public library. So that's something we can look at. It's a little bit outside the box in terms of thinking. But if you've got those HIPAA compliant spaces in places that are already community centers, they already serve as such, I think it's a step in the right direction, and we can do that permanently. And they're serviced by something called MoreNet, which is a high-speed internet network that goes to all the academic libraries and the public libraries in the state of Missouri, with a couple of exceptions. So the infrastructure is already there. It's just a question of what we do to maximize what's already in place.
And just a little bit more information on those hotspots within the library. It has a 21-day checkout. So you can check it out for 21 days. But then you can get it renewed if you have no holds. But after 42 days, there's a $100 fee. So forgive me, my Spectrum bill is $49.99. I know it's going to change after the year because, you know, they always get you with a promotion, reel you in, and then it changes after that. But if I'm only paying half of the $100 fee, it's easier for someone to get that access. But even if you have your Spectrum Wi-Fi at home, sometimes it's a little shoddy. Charter is also. That's because of the infrastructure. It has nothing to do with the carrier themselves. It has everything to do with the cell towers, the fibers that are embedded within the ground, on the roads. It has everything to do with the infrastructure. So until we can actually get into the infrastructure side of this, we're going to continuously hit this barricade, this roadblock that's right in front of us that will not allow us to get to these places where we can give more quality access. It's amazing to me, if you go downtown, it's better cell service and better access where the Cardinals are playing, but only about 10 blocks to the north, you can't barely make a phone call to save your life, or it's dropping every 5 seconds. So we have the foundation. Now we just have to expand on it. And I know we're scared of that word expansion a lot of times, but we have to find a way to broaden where we are putting and how we are putting these resources.
You know, I'll just add a little something to that. We have something out there called census block methodology through the FCC. And census blocks, I mean, they're very small chunks of people. And the way the FCC basically scores access, if one person in that census block has access, you all have access. Check the box, move on. And actually, I have a county in my district where there are like 2 census blocks in one corner of the county that are served. And the entire county gets knocked out every single time the feds open up another round of whatever. Oh, you're served. No, they're not. We know they're not. They know they're not. The FCC knows they're not. So that's one really nice thing about our state fund is it goes off a community standard, i.e. where are the people, who's getting served, who isn't. And the population density we have in urban areas, there is no excuse for saying, oh my goodness, you're served when you're not. And the old narrative is, well, there's just no money in it. There is money in it. It's not this week. It's not this month. It may not be this quarter. But if we can leverage these EBB funds in perpetuity, then I think we're going to take a step in the right direction for thousands of folks who otherwise would be outside looking in. In the 21st century, if you're not online, you don't exist anymore. And that's just a sad fact of the matter. And that has happened to far too many Missourians for far too long. And we can do better. And I think using that state fund to go out here and leverage that 7-to-1 at 400 million becomes 2 billion, over 2 billion if we do it right. And that's something we have a track record in the state of doing it right. It's just a question of putting the resources in a place where they can do the job. And this is exactly what we're talking about in areas such as this, where we do have the people, we just don't have the service. We can do better than that. And these emergency funds are a big step in that direction.
Hello, I had a question. You stated earlier that there's currently companies bidding for this federal dollars to provide access in the state of Missouri, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How are you ensuring company A in North Missouri, the technology that they're utilizing to provide access is equal to the technology, if equal or better, in part B in the state at Southern Missouri?
Okay. It's a really good question. How do you make sure? Well, theoretically, the FCC is supposed to do that for us. The USDA through RDOF is supposed to be doing that. The short answer is they don't. And we have had some carriers come into this state and take unconscionable sums of money. And what they do in the reverse auction is they bid that thing down to the point where they're the only ones who can go out there and do it. And I had a town hall in Perryville where we had folks show up and it wasn't pretty. And folks literally, they checked the box, census block, oh, you're covered. They weren't. And if they were a half mile outside of that particular service area, they had nothing. We had people come up from Bollinger County. You don't get much more rural than that. Had nothing. I mean, nothing. They couldn't even get a cell phone signal anywhere. I've got an economic developer in my district who has to go out in the middle of Highway 15. I didn't believe her at first. I thought, oh, that's just an exaggeration. It's true. I've done it. He'd go out in the middle of the highway and dodge grain trucks to get a cell phone signal because that's the only place in town you can get it. These places are all over the state. And that's something that has been going on since 15, 20 years now, where the feds are the ones who've basically been providing the money, and the carriers come in, they do whatever it is they're going to do, minimum requirements, and they move on. We've got a carrier coming in here. I'm not going to say what. It's not from Missouri. Same story, different stanza. where come in, say, oh, check the box, we got your census block covered, and they move on. And half the people there don't have a thing. And that's on them. The state fund is on us. We put something in statute last year that says if you don't get your funds out there, we give you state money, you don't get yourself deployed within 3 years, you give the money back. We're not playing this game at the state. The Fed's been playing it for years, and it's not helping anybody. So from a state standpoint, we solve that problem. And any good carrier out there can get it done in 3 years, period. They already have the plans to do it. It's these folks coming from other places, taking all this money and basically forcing our people out who are the problem children. It's not the folks who are in state doing this for a living. They're our neighbors. They live here. They're not from other places. They're trying to do the best they have with what they got. When they get knocked out of these auctions, that's it. So that's why this state fund is so important to put as much money into it as we can, because we have a challenge process that works. You can't come in there and overload. Basically, we say, oh, no, I'm sorry about that. These people aren't served. You're trying to serve people who are already getting it. And these folks over here, 2 miles to the west or east, don't. And that's all over the state. And you have examples of it right here in the city. We can do better at the state than they can at the feds. Sorry about that, feds, but it's true.
My second question was, I know the standard is, I think you said it earlier, 25-3 right now. And we know technology changes very fast. How do we ensure in the next 5 years that these areas that are now that we're going to give access to don't get left behind when technology changes again?
So I'm taking a moment to process that, because now you're getting into the equity side of the conversation. And we know that that buzz of equity changes a lot of things. You assure that by making sure that there is a component within any legislation that is passed that says we have to abide by this percent of this percent. So for instance, when we talk about contractors, there has to be a good faith effort of 12% of contractors have to be minority contractors. We know the word minority has been diluted. It was supposed to stand for African Americans or other people of color. However, women are now also tied in that minority word, which could also go into Caucasian white women as well. They can be a part of that 12% population. So to ensure that when we're talking about the infrastructure, there has to be a percentage that goes specifically to those underserved communities. And teaming up with HBCUs, who are the heart of those cities, to have the development for jobs, the development for education also ensures that, because we know tech is one of the #1 industries, or will be the #1 industry in the next 10 years or so. It is. Yep. We know in the next 10 years that that's going to be #1 as well as agriculture. People got to eat, and technology is just going to surpass us. By the time I turn 40, I'm hoping to be driving in a car that floats, maybe. Hopeful. But in all seriousness, we have to, in those places, we have to present a percentage of all of those dollars to go to those underserved communities. And within going to those underserved communities, it has to go to those underserved communities education centers, like Harris Stowe State University, to say, we're going to give you this money to assure that with STEM, which Representative Riggs was instrumental in passing this year, a resolution to identify Harris Stowe as a true STEM institution, which it should have been for many years, but we'll get into that another day. But in passing that, we're saying that this is a hub to ensure that those students are coming out of here that are going towards engineering. They're going toward the mathematics. They're going toward the technology. They're going toward the science. So we have to put money and invest money into these areas. And not only that, You have the it's the 5 million, if I'm not mistaken, when they switched for the distance learning in 2020. You have 5 million students who found themselves without broadband access to internet. So even though we may have a problem here in Missouri, we still got a problem in Illinois. And those kids will be coming over here because they'll be looking for quality access when we pour into our infrastructure, but they'll be coming to the Harris Stowes of the world, or the SLUs and the Webster or the Webster universities, or SLPS, or charter schools, or whoever, to find how to get that technology moving forward. So it's not just about putting a percentage in there, but it's also putting those bodies in place to make sure that they can take up those jobs and take the mantle when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's a really good question for another couple of reasons. And part of that's the Internet of Things. And so the Representative Bosley's point about STEM, right now, the two top tier next 15, 20-year jobs, the focus is going to be on computer-driven science, which encompasses everything we just talked about. And the other one's going to be nursing, because the boomers like me are going to live forever. We've made that determination, and we're going to be around until we're 110. So geriatric nursing is going to take on even more added emphasis. What we do with the standard is we take a look at what the federal government says the minimum that must be. At this moment, it's 25.3. They're thinking out loud now with the ARPA funds that they're recommending 100 symmetrical, 100 up, 100 down, 120 worst case. Well, when they recommend it 1 year, they require it 2 or 3 down the road. So when we put the standard in statute, that was in 2018, it was 25.3. That was then the accepted norm. Well, everybody knew then it was going to be obsolete. We just didn't know how soon. It's here. So we're already thinking 100, 120. The problem we've run into with the Internet of Things, we have so many things now in our house that are smart. I found out that the Ring doorbell is a meg each. Folks who have 10.1, guess what? You got 3 or 4, security devices around. You've got that little thing that runs around the floor and eats up dust, which kind of creeped me out. I'm sorry, I'm just not there yet.
I've tripped over one.
Jetsons kind of stuff. Those all are taking up bandwidth. And I've talked to one provider, said, what's the most amount of devices you have in one house in your service area? 27. Sounds like a lot. And then you find out the average across the state is 7. Next year it'll be 10. The year after that it'll be 12 to 15, and on it goes, because this is where we're headed as a nation. Technology is going into every nook and cranny of our lives, whether you like it or not. So we're going to have to put something in the statute where we can float. When the feds, raise that up, we're going to have to respond in real time to say, okay, fine, we'll pair it up with whatever the federal standard is. But from the accessibility side of things, being at the end of a dead end street, I know when my neighbors are on the same service I am, because mine gets a little wonky. And I've got a neighbor who deals with loan documents, and that's a 75 to 100 page upload. I know when that's happening because it's, oh, where'd that signal go? There's nothing here. Well, we're buffering. Why is that? What do you think? So during regular business hours, folks out there, I've got 100 whatever. Everybody in that pipe is doing something at the same time. We actually had this happen in the Capitol. The last hearing we had, we couldn't get Zoom to work downstairs. Sent my legislative assistant upstairs to see what happened there. It worked initially, and then it kicked us out, and we couldn't get back on. And when all of us are on our phones in the General Assembly inside that building, there are times when you have to literally go out in the hallway, go to a window, and try and get a signal to get anything at all. So we laugh about it because on some level it's funny, but it really isn't, because we know at certain times, peak hours, we're going to need a lot more than is there. We know as a state, we don't have the resilience in this network that we need. We found that out when COVID hit, and we went to online learning from in-seat. It basically overwhelmed the system. The businesses were suffering, the students were suffering. I mean, everybody basically was getting it in the neck at the same time because everybody was on their devices. So we know we're going to have to build out more capacity everywhere. And that's something that, again, we go back to our state fund. That's something we're going to have to embed that in statute to say, here's your aspirational goal. And ideally, folks should be blasting out a gig. We've got providers in the state who do a gig up and down symmetrical now. And some of them are rural. I've got one in the district to my immediate south. They're 400 households away from hardwiring the entire county. They stopped doing fixed wireless years ago because it didn't make sense. So, it's all fiber to the home now. And the other thing we found out is folks trying to sell their homes, if they don't have fiber, aren't selling them. Young people, if you're on the age of 50, you're not going to buy that house. And we've had realtors actually say, we will pay for you to run your service to this house. The realtors pay for it because they know the house won't sell without it. So that's where we're at. And it's only going to accelerate. The need is only going to become greater, and we have to get in front of it or be overwhelmed by it. So we've been overwhelmed once. We know what happened. We know we need to do better. It's just a question now of pairing up the resources with the anticipated need. There are a lot of smart folks out there who are working on this, a lot smarter than me, who will tell you, the 27 devices in the house, that's going to be chump change in 5 years. And you look back 10 years ago, we thought 10.1 was all that. It's not. 25.3 now is inadequate. And before you know it, 100 will be something that we talked about wistfully in the past, because we're going to zoom right past it. And that's just the fact. We have to face up to that, and we have to get in front of it.
So Representative Riggs, you talked about limitations in mapping across the state. So I really have two questions. So
Can you come closer to the mic?
So you talked about mapping, the limitations in mapping across the state of Missouri. So how would better mapping help bring solutions to this issue? And then my second question is, as an academic institution, what could the academic community do to help bring solutions to this agenda as well?
Okay, the questions just keep getting better. Mapping is a problem because basically people don't know where the broadband resources are. And when you've got your statewide director answering the phone, oh, gee, yeah, you're 2 miles away. If I had a quarter for everybody who called my office or called me at home and said, hey, I'm 2 miles from this, I'm 2 miles from that, I'm on a letter blacktop, I'm here, I'm there, where is it? I'd be taking a lot better vacations. So the mapping piece, the FCC requires providers basically to pony up the numbers. Where are you? The problem is when they publish the map, the numbers are at least 6 months out of date, sometimes longer. The other problem is we need to know quicker than that from a provider standpoint, because these are folks out here doing it in real time. So I was at a meeting here within the last month where a provider in my area literally got out their maps, and we had county commissioners from 4 different counties sitting there, put the maps up on the wall. Here's where we are. This is what our network looks like. These are proprietary. They don't have to do this, but they did because they want to show us. Here's where we are in blue. Here's where we're going in red. So they've got all this mapped out. They know the resources. They bought the fiber. They've got the work crew schedule. I mean, they've got this thing down to an art form. And then they pull up the maps, not the stuff on the wall, but the GIS stuff, where you could literally drill down to so-and-so's house on the corner of whatever, letter blacktop A and County Road 422 to see whether or not they have the service. And that's the granular type maps that we just don't have at the FCC. We don't have them at the state. We do have something in Missouri now called the Broadband Resource Rail. University of Missouri Columbia has put that together. They have their own GIS folks. It's really good, but it's not the state map. So they invented the wheel. We don't have to reinvent that. We have to figure out a way basically to partner with them or whomever who can give us that real-time information. State of West Virginia has something they call a Broadband Enhancement Council, where part of what they do is legislative oversight, real-time. Part of it's stakeholder engagement, real time. And the other, which is the most fun, is the map, which is real time. And it's generated by folks out there who do speed tests. And who here hasn't done a speed test? and we've all done it. We've got a regional planning commissioner director. Everywhere she goes, she runs a speed test. She says, "Oh, so what's your service here?" Well, it's 25 this, 25 that. No, it's not. And here's what it actually is. And she can show you. And that's where folks, basically the rubber meets the road, where this data is being collected all time, every day, all day, 365, 24, 366 days in a leap year, but we don't have access to it. So for me, that's a pretty easy step. And I think it's something we're going to recommend. Everybody agrees on this. We can do this at the state level better than the feds. We can do it closer to home. We can do it better information, and we don't have to wait 6, 9, 12 months to figure out exactly what's out there. If we can get that in real time, that takes a lot of the mystery out. And a lot of the frustration for folks is they just don't know where it is, how soon they can get it. They want it yesterday. We all do. But the folks who basically have no hope need hope. And the maps are a way to get at that. If there's trouble, we get that, but there's help on the way, and here's how close it is to you. And I think that would help us a lot as a state to take that critical step forward, and we know where it is, as well as where it isn't.
So in mapping also, that goes with making sure that the department or whomever we get can handle doing the mapping. So that's another side of it, also bureaucratic side of it too. So while mapping is important, we need to make sure that the technology that we have when doing the mapping or keeping and updating the mapping constantly online is accurate also.
And it helps us with the challenge process as well, where somebody says, "Oh, I've got this great idea. We're going to go in here," and it's already there. No, you're not. This area over here, 2 miles to your east, isn't served. You need to go there.
Mhm.
If you want the state dollars, and keep in mind, the state dollars are matching funds. It's not a gift. You have to have skin in the game to get those dollars. And that's why they go so much quicker, is they've already planned this stuff. They know exactly what they want to do, exactly where they want to go. And these folks have business plans that work, and they've capitalized this. They've, assessed the risk. They're ready to go today. They just can't get there because they don't have that seed money, and the state can get them that, whereas the feds aren't, because they've been knocked out of whatever because of the reverse auction, which we've already talked about is just not doing the job. Did that answer all the question? Okay.
Was it the educational institutions part two of how they can assist as well?
Yeah.
That was the second piece of it. So I kind of elaborated on it a little bit for the other question was, you all can help by producing scholars that can go into these fields. You all can help by doing your own independent studies to say, hey, we're serving this era, we're serving these communities, we're serving these constituents and these people. Here's what they need. Because if you give us something as an institution, an educational institution, we're going to look at it. We have to look at it because you're the ones who are producing the next future waves of politicians, business owners, teachers, hedge fund, all of the people. You're producing the new people who will take over the world. My brother said something the other day that kind of resonated with me. He said, somebody's always turning 21 somewhere. Now, that was a gut punch to me. However, it was eye-opening to say, wow, someone's always turning 21 somewhere, and you're always learning and educating at any level, even if you decide to go to a four-year college or even if you don't. You're getting some form of education, some form of knowledge. So educational institutions, what you can do is make sure that you're keeping up with the new codes, you're keeping up with the new plans that are happening within the FCC, you're keeping up with all of the data that is out there and presenting a plan to us that can give us a better idea what we can do on the state level. And not only that, but how we can do a private-public partnership, or how we can do a partnership also with our local government, alders, et cetera. That gives us a better idea to be able to push that forward as well.
And there are a couple other things to add to that. And Representative Bosley has done a really good job of mapping out what we need to do. And that's produce students who are capable of getting into that space immediately. So that's why STEM is so important. It's also why STEAM is so important. And that's something that they're introducing now in the grade schools. The arts piece of that is the innovation. That's also where the young ladies get into the game, because, it's not all, numbers and all that other, but it's something where there's a greater creativity involved. There's more engagement. Actually, we have a STEAM campus, fifth grade, or the Stowe School in my town went through that. I was watching a fifth grade gym teacher teach physics, and the kids couldn't wait to get up there. It's just rope and pulley, but he's got one of the weights from the weight room.
Mhm.
And what's he doing? And they all can't wait to take their turn. So he's telling them the entire time, and it's basically, here's Newton 101. And these kids are so hungry to learn that they have no idea. They've just been tricked into learning,
Mhm.
but they know because it's hands-on, and they were excited. And I'm just sitting there laughing at him. And he's like, see, it's that easy. So that's something where we're purposeful as educators to get folks involved in that space, because that's where the jobs are going to be. And these jobs are going to pay, and pay well, for a very long time. Another thing that the folks can do in education, exactly what we're doing here right now, is convene. Mizzou's doing something at the University Extension where they're going around basically pilot counties. Bollinger is one, Clinton's another, and they're getting people together doing exactly what we're doing here, talking about what the issues are, what do we need to do, how do we basically skill up, and how do we staff up? What people do we need in the middle of this? My region, we have done now broadband, basically regional meetings since 2019. COVID, we didn't get to, but we did this year, and we came out of that and we said, we need a broadband steering committee for this whole region. We've met 3 times, and basically what we're doing now, we've set the goal as universal access throughout our entire corner of the state. How are we going to get there? We have the providers basically in front of us all the time. Where are you? You need to be here. You need to be there. I'm hearing from this one. This subdivision over here is coming online in 2 years. Are you going to be there in time? So there's a lot of communication that goes on between us and the folks who are actually out there, the providers doing it, but they need to know where people are going next. And they also need to have people who are capable of signing on to be on that crew to go out there and deploy that fiber, because it's going to help everybody. And there are folks out there really hurting for laborers right now because they don't have the skills.
Mhm.
They just aren't there. So that's incumbent upon us as educators to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our communities in terms of workforce development, which Harris Stowe has been so phenomenally good at, is keeping those students here with their workforce ready when they get that diploma, or while they're still doing an internship or an apprenticeship. And we invest basically in those people to get into these particular fields that are going to pay us off 1,000 times over the next 10 to 20 years. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We put the people in place to do the job gets done, and they get paid well to do it. So it's a really good question. And I look forward to talking with you more about that. It's something a lot of us can work on. And the folks who aren't in that space yet really need to be.
So Anissa Rockhold online, she said, please know that not all carriers are the same. Not all carriers take the federal support and fail to provide quality service to the areas they are committed to serve. She said, I believe that smaller telecommunication corporatives or independent carriers do much better with this than larger national carriers.
You or me? You want to take that one?
No, you got it.
And I think this is another really good point. And I mentioned the word before, neighbors. So when we're dealing with something like a co-op, these are folks basically who were created in the 1930s. And I tell this story because it's fun and it's true. I had a step great grandmother who lived in the house she was born in. It started out as a log cabin. She was there 94 years, and she had a kerosene lamp up in a corner of the living room. And I asked her one time, I said, why is that there? And it's huge. And she said, oh, well, when the lights go out, I have a light. She always had it filled with kerosene. She said, but before we had electricity, that was how we lit this room. Well, she was in her 50s when she got electricity. That was back in the 1930s. And we are to that point now where for a lot of folks, it's like the same thing when they brought electric light to rural Missouri. Literally, they turned the lights on for the first time ever. We're at that point now with the internet. Folks literally can't turn the lights on with their learning, their jobs, any of that other, because frankly, the resources aren't there. So the co-ops were designed to go out there and electrify basically the entire state, rural parts of the state. And originally it was said, well, the utilities, well, there's no money in that. Well, we're having the same argument today, aren't we? There was money in it then. It's just, well, you weren't going to get it back right away. And the thing people forget about rural electrification was you had to put your $5 in to get it from the pole to the house. It wasn't a lot, but the depression it was. Same thing we're going through here. How do we get it from middle mile to the last mile? We've got to have people willing to sign up for it. And what co-ops have done and what some of the smaller providers have done, and we've got somebody in here could speak to that, is literally they go door to door like a political campaign. And they say, we're 2 miles away from you over here. We'd really like to come to your area. And for them to make money, it has to be at least 4 per square mile. Not a problem in St. Louis, problem in other areas of the state. And so we need you to subscribe. Their take rates when they do that are 85, 90%, sometimes higher than that. And the ones who don't take it are the ones who are left out, who get it later because they figure out, uh-oh, when it's time to sell the house, nobody's going to buy it. So that's something where they have much more incentive because they live there, they work there. They're the ones who come in and restore your power when it gets knocked out in a storm because they live among you. It's not something where they're, 1,000 miles away, some corporate headquarters, whatever. These are folks who are your neighbors. So yeah, they do a really good job of that. I'm going to depress myself when I say this. The state of Mississippi is taking $700 million and plowing it into their co-ops. Mississippi has bad internet, just like we do, but they've decided the best vehicle to take that out, I think it's like 1.2 billion. They're taking more than 50% of what they get from the federal government and they're plowing into their co-ops. Their co-ops are jumping for joy. Some of them weren't internet service providers. They are now. And that's a similar dynamic we're working with here. Arkansas, 14 out of the 17 co-ops are internet service providers. They're very rural. We don't have quite the same makeup here. We have a lot of rural, but we've also got a lot of urban, a lot of suburban. Other states don't have the same dynamic we do. They don't have St. Louis and Kansas City and Springfield, St. Charles County, all that. But the problems are still basically the same, where you've got folks who really aren't responsive to their customers because, quote unquote, there's no money there. When they're looking at a quarterly balance sheet, profit loss, the co-ops are looking at 100-year, a 10-year, 15, 20-year time frame, not next quarter's earnings, because it's just the way they're set up, their business model. So it takes them a while to get there, but they plan this stuff out meticulously. And once we put funds in front of them, they knock that ball out of the park every day of the week. And they're the ones who are literally staffed up, ready to go. I mean, it's what they do for a living. And they're not there to come in fly by night like some of these providers the FCC have funded so generously, who come and they go. They don't stay in this state. They have no intention of staying in this state. They just take the money and run. Sorry, that was an editorial. I shouldn't have done that.
So Cindy also said you could crowdsource collecting the speed test information, have citizens test and submit their data, and tag the test of day and time too for mapping.
That's a great idea. There are services out there that aggregate that already, and I'm not going to name all of them. Several of them do it, but yeah, the crowdsource side of it. And that's something, again, where our higher education folks, if you wanted to have a student do a project and say, oh my goodness, what's the internet like over here? We've got those resources out there now where these folks are generating this data. And I should have mentioned this earlier, and it just came back to me. Representative Bosley mentioned agriculture, precision ag in particular. They're literally generating new reams of data that did not exist 5 years ago, because all of the folks buying new equipment now, it's all GPS, and they are sending out, bits of data all the time as they operate. There's literally a new, I would call it an industry developing around analyzing that data, where equipment dealers are basically being told, hey, we need somebody who can make sense out of this. So they're literally creating new jobs as equipment dealers to run through these reams of data and say, what does this actually mean? So it helps the folks with the input costs, better yields, and so on and so forth. That's something that's really exciting for folks out in rural, because we all know we've got to eat, but at the same time, there's a class of job that didn't exist 5 years ago. And we look in workforce development 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and we're told 40 to 50% of the jobs that exist today will not exist as we know them when the kindergartner today graduates high school in 12 years.
Mhm.
And that's just a perfect example of what that looks like. So if we're ahead of these trends and we get out there and we say, hey, here's an emerging technology, we need to put people in place where they can get these jobs, we're going to do fine. But this stuff's just is cropping up all over. And the more we get into technology, the more these types of jobs are going to create basically out of thin air.
And even with crowdsourcing, I know a lot of people have skepticism around it because they feel like, well, they may be tapping into my data, or they may be tracking my phone if I submit this information. There are protections around that so that that does not happen. They will not be able to do that. So in saying that, it is okay for you to take it, and to your educational point of what can educational institutions do, when we were talking about the study, you could literally have, as Representative Ridge just said, a kid or a student go out, a scholar, I like to call them scholars. You can have a scholar go out and literally do a crowdsource themselves, where we register people to vote. You can have people come up and say, let's check the internet status. Let's check the broadband feed, and just have them sit right there on the corner all day, and they can do that. And we can get some type of idea for that specific area and that could be a study or a report that comes just from this HBCU, where we can get that from the WashUs, we can get that from the SLUs, because they have a lot more resources to be able to allocate for that, to be independent contractors or push their kids to do, their scholars to do that. Whereas we're not really focusing on that, but we are focusing on it now that we have the designation of being a STEM institution. Just putting that tidbit out there for us to kind of get a better idea of how we can maneuver through that a little bit better. I don't see any more online.
Any more questions from folks here? I think, did we have ARP?
I think we did. I think he
I
left.
think he left. Okay.
Yes.
If anybody here, we also are taking, we tape these, basically we record these so the committee can take a look at them later. And one of the things we really enjoy doing is hearing not just from folks on the question side, but actually we would call it informational testimony. So we have no bills in front of us. So anybody who wants to basically add to the conversation, here's where we're at. Here are some problems. We call them pain points in Jefferson City. Encourage anybody who wanted to do that at this moment to go ahead and do so. And our 4 microphones right over here. So if anybody wanted to discuss that. If not, it was going to throw it back to Representative Bosley as far as conversations we've had over the last couple of years. Areas in the city, I mentioned we had been out in Florissant for town hall, 25%. What are you hearing, or what are you seeing in terms of access within the city of St. Louis? First question. Second question, what are you hearing as far as the administration within the city and their efforts? And I'll just back that up. When we were in Kansas City, the mayor's office there has a digital literacy / digital inclusion initiative that Mid-Continent Public Library is a part of, Kansas City Public Library, Goodwill Industries, and several other nonprofits. Basically, all they're doing right now is making sure that people out there don't just have the access, but have the head knowledge to deal with the access that they have. So the digital literacy piece, we really haven't talked about. It's what they're doing right now. And they're doing a really good job at it, but it's literally down to the house level. So if I could throw that in your direction.
So I kind of elaborated a little bit about what we're hearing on my end, and in North City. There is no access. There's poor access. They're demanding and wanting to have quality access, equitable access. There's no reason, as I said before, that you go downtown to or near Busch Stadium and you get better cell service and internet service than you do 2 blocks or 10 blocks to the east, going toward North St. Louis City. There's no reason that we have that. Or if you're going down 64, as I said, uncharacteristic of a St. Louisan, but I'm going to continue to call it 64. When you're going down 64 and your cell service drops right when you get to the Hampton, Clayton exits, that's problematic also, because it's telling us that we don't have the same quality or the infrastructure as they do in the Brentwood or as they do in Clayton or in Wildwood or Frontenac, to be very frank. All in those areas where we know that their dollar amount of living is a lot higher than what we have here in the city, even in the South Side. Both sides are not at the same level that they have in Frontenac or in certain areas of Clayton or in Bridgeton or Brentwood or your St. Charles's of the world. But the efforts of the city to be able to put that money back in there, I don't know anything from the administration or what they're doing to do that. I will have, and Isaac's online, I already let him know to find the answers to that question so that we can disseminate that to everyone else. I do not know what Mayor Jones's administration is doing to help qualify that, or create some mechanism to find out a way for us to go into private public partnerships with nonprofits or whoever, et cetera. I don't know the answer to that question, unfortunately. However, hearing anything is, this is a problem that's been going on longer before you and I have been in the legislature. I've only been in here 3 years. You've only been in here 3 years. I've been hearing this since my father was an alderman, and he was an alderman for over 30 years. Since my brother was mayor, that was over 28 years ago. We've been hearing the same problem of saying we do not have quality access to anything internet driven or broadband driven in these areas. That is a problem. It's been a problem for over 20 years. It's been a problem for over 30 years. And yet we have not done anything to rectify that situation. Not only have we not done anything to rectify the broadband situation, but you can go into the economic situation. We know the economy plays a very large role into what infrastructure is placed into those communities. Education is also a part of that too. So this isn't just a one-stop shop. We're not just talking about broadband. We're talking about the full spectrum of how broadband unites educators, how it unites communities, how it unites businesses, how it involves the communities evolve the communities to being better and bringing more businesses and wanting businesses into those areas. You're not going to want to bring a small business or even a large business or a large corporation into a place where you can barely use your Square. We have a partnership with Square. Square just took over the old, what is it called? Newspaper building downtown. They just took that over and they're putting millions of dollars into that infrastructure, but yet they're on the brink of being in North City. And yet we still don't have that same infrastructure pieces to say, why don't we have a community benefits agreement with the Square, where Square has to put X amount of dollars from the city and the city will match, and then the state will also match in order for us to get the broadband, in order for us to get education, in order for us to get better housing, for us to get equitable everything. It's not just a one-stop shop. This is a round conversation that we're talking about here. Broadband is just the one step and just the one focal point. So.
I'm just going to talk a little bit further about some generational shifts. So I'm 60 years old. I've been 30 twice. You'll be 31 of these days. What I run into, and I teach 18 to 22-year-olds, I teach adult learners. I've got master's students in their 50s. I've had students who are older than I am. But what we're finding generational shift with Gen Z, basically the follow on to the millennials. I have a daughter who's at the tail end of millennials and a son who's in the leading edge of Gen Z. Survey after survey, 50%, solid 50% want to and fully intend to work for themselves. I have a daughter now who's in the gig economy. She works for herself, having the time of her young life, no kids, no attachments. She's good. We've got young people out here who want to be entrepreneurs, who have some great ideas, but they don't have the seed money. And in this day and age, if they don't have the internet access, they don't exist. If you're not online, you don't have a presence, you don't have a website, you don't have at least a really good Facebook page, nobody knows you're out there. I've talked to people in my district in rural Shelby County who would love nothing more than to stay home, stay on the farm, raise the kids, do what they want, and they have some really good product ideas, but they don't have enough bandwidth literally to accept a PayPal payment online. So they're doing the old school, whatever, doing the trade shows and going here, going there. And when COVID hit, nobody was doing anything. So they're not moving product.
Mhm.
So I think from an educator standpoint, as a legislator and appropriator standpoint, we need to ask more of ourselves of what we can do for these young people at the place they are right now. And we've got a lack of cell phone signal out there. We can't even activate a hotspot. What use is the tablet we give you one-to-one equivalency and say, here's your assignment. Watch the YouTube video for the flipped classroom. They can't access it, so they don't get the lesson. Oh, upload your assignment and send it by such and such time. I've run into this personally with my students. They don't have the bandwidth to upload a thing until 2 or 3 in the morning. That's a problem. And well, gee, there's nobody in that pipe at that moment. You can finally get your stuff uploaded if it's, of any size file whatsoever. And I have students who send me videos of their, online, basically their presentations are a file. They send it. Sometimes it won't go through at all because frankly, they don't have the broadband on their end. We're fine. We've got more net. We've got the access, but it's the folks on the receiving end, basically the students who don't have it. So I look at, in one-to-one equivalency. Another one is you look at food deserts, you also see broadband deserts, and they almost go together hand in hand. And it's rather disturbing in 2021 that we're even having this conversation, but here we are.
And it's funny that you said well, not funny, but for entrepreneurship, St. Louis is number 1 for entrepreneurship amongst Black women. We've literally been leading the charge in Missouri for entrepreneurship. And you can't start a business, even if you're talking about Facebook. So that shows you just generational right there. You have Instagram, you have TikTok, you have Snapchat, you have these large streaming services out there where if you're not present on those, then like you said, you do not exist. If you do not have a digital footprint for any business right now, you're non-existent.
YouTube channel.
YouTube,
Yeah,
you're non-existent right now. So with that, and Cindy, thank you for telling me this. The city has allocated 1.5 million of the ARPA funds. I didn't call it AARP this time, toward addressing the broadband issue now. So even with us having the 1.5, you've got a city with, thankfully, we kept population of over 300,000 people, and yet we're only allocating 1.5 million. That's all we can expand on. But the Department of Economic Development has 5 to 50 million in order for us to address it statewide. So now we have to go deeper into the conversation of saying, how do we bring those people to the table of community benefits? You got a big AT&T tower that sits downtown. They're a provider also. So why can't we have a conversation with them of pouring into the 1.5 million and saying, hey, would you match this 1.5 million? If we get 10 people, 10 corporations to match a 1.5 million from the city, then we have more than enough. Also with the state to be able to have those providers come in and help with the infrastructure. We have more than enough to help with the broadband and to keep up with the time of not, was it 24 and 1, 23 and 1, 25 and 1, to now go from that to go to the 30 and 1, to go to the 45 and 1. I don't know what all of that means. I am not by far a broadband contractor. I don't know how that would work, but I do know numbers. And that's one of the reasons why I sit on budget. We can figure out a way to make this work if we have the community input, but we can get those private partnerships also included in that.
And sitting here, Harris Stowe, I'd also like to compliment Harris Stowe on the sheer volume of strategic partnerships that this institution has. I wish we did. But at the same time, you raise an incredibly valid point from the public-private partnership point of view. There are folks out there who have resources, who use them in lots of different ways. And if this were more of a focused effort, I look at it as a force multiplier. Right now, I'm really concentrating on my counties. 114 of them out there, most of them rural. And a lot of those folks are walking around. They put the check in the bank. They don't have a plan. Plan one. There are regional planning commissions all over the state. They cover every county, including St. Louis City, St. Louis County. We had one of our town halls. We had a meeting at Mid-America Regional Council in Kansas City. That's what these folks do for a living. It's in their name, Regional Planning Commission. A plan is not a contract. It's a plan. It's a guideline. It's an index, whatever you want to call it. It's a way forward. And folks who are literally going out there saying, oh, I'm really afraid of the federal government. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of that. I had commissioners in my district ask point blank, CARES Act money, can we put this into broadband? Took a look, talked to some people who know what they're talking about, said absolutely. We've had whatever reluctance on the part of a lot of folks around this state with the ARPA money coming down and say, oh, gee, we'll commit to that. And my question back is, how many dump trucks and road graders can you buy? These are depreciating assets. I get it. You need it. But how do you not invest in your people? How do we invest in folks to make the economy grow at the same time, keep our population base where it needs to be? So I can name one county on the Arkansas border that lost 25% of its population in 10 years. I can also name you the only county in my neck of the woods that showed population growth. And guess what? They're the ones who are 400 households away from getting the entire county hardwired with fiber to the home. There's a correlation there as well. That's the way the numbers are headed. If you have this necessity, people would call it a luxury. It's not about streaming Netflix anymore. This is basically about being part of the 21st century, not just the economy, but the educational system. When you have 800,000 Missourians in this state who have had some college, but did not finish a 2 or 4 year degree, that's an opportunity lost. What are those folks doing? Most of them, they're adult learners. Where are they? They're at home. What would they like to do? They would like to do better with their jobs. How do they do that? They skill up. They get an industry recognized certification. They do workforce development. They go back to school. They take classes. They get to the point where their employers say, we can pay you more because you have met a skill level. You've met that threshold. We want you to stay in the next 5, 10, how many years? And we will build basically the business model around what we see in front of us, but also the people we have. We're going to invest in these folks. And if we're not investing as corporations, it's not just all the state. The state's not the Lord God Almighty. We just facilitate a process. We help create conditions where folks are able to come in and basically say, hey, we can prosper here. our tax base is whatever, our regulatory base is whatever. We can afford to expand. We want to expand, but we have to have that human capital piece in there as well. So from a higher education standpoint, that's something I would challenge everybody to say, are we where we need to be in terms of the future, the jobs that are going to present themselves the next 10, 15 years? Are we there yet? A lot of institutions, frankly, aren't, because they're doing the same old, like it's the 1970s. They're partying like it's 1999, and life has passed them by, and their business models aren't what they should be, and they're going to die. I'm trustee of a small college here where I went to school. And frankly, the enrollment numbers aren't where they need to be. We're looking at a demographic cliff in 2026. The students weren't born because of the recession 2008, 2009. So there are some things structurally we need to be dealing with in terms of workforce development that we're just not there yet, but broadband is a huge part of that. So I'm glad we've been able to have a conversation like this here at Harris Stowe, where folks are doing it right. They're doing it purposefully, and they understand what type of economic impact they can have on the St. Louis region. But we've got to have other partners with skin in the game.
Absolutely. If there are no more questions. Okay. Do you all have any more questions? Are there any questions online? Because we can talk our ear off. We can talk to y'all all day.
We'll filibuster. We'll pretend we're senators.
We can do this all day long, trust me. But the purpose of this is to figure out, like I said earlier, what do we need to do in order, or what are your concerns for us to be able to make sure that when we're going back to the legislature, we're telling them exactly what the people are telling us. It's not just our ideas. It's not just something that we believe, but this is what the entire state is requiring, because as Representative Riggs said, he's traveled all over the state to try to fix this issue. This has been one of his top priorities since he entered the legislature. We were able to get money in the budget, I think, was it last year and the year before, for broadband. It was vetoed in 2019, or it was taken out in the Senate, and then we got it passed this year.
Yeah, 19 was a real adventure. We won't go into the gory details, but if we hadn't funded that program, then it was the second year of a 3-year cycle. We may never have funded it. So we got that done. But as we go around the state, and I'm hearing a lot of it here as well, the issues are basically the same. The mapping is not anywhere near where it needs to be. The access is a problem. Affordability is a problem. And also the emergency funds are underutilized. And that's something I think really as a state, it's incumbent upon us to look at these and say, hey, we're going to put resources behind this. We need to get out there. We need to publicize this. These funds are there. The feds don't want the money back. They want us to use them. But we've got to get in a better place where we publicize this, or folks know what's out there and they're actually taking advantage of an existing program. And with any luck, it stays as a permanent feature of the landscape, and we can put a lot more people in a position where they can thrive, as opposed to outside looking in, which is where too many of them are today.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you for staying. Thank you everyone online for listening. If you have any other questions, you can email my office and Representative Riggs's office directly. As I said, or just call us. We put our number out there. I believe they're going to put it into the chat online, also in the Zoom call, so that you have that information, as well as placing it on our Facebooks and our Instagrams and our Twitters and all of the other streaming places where you can find this information. This was also recorded, so that we can go back and look at it and make sure that we're saying everything correctly. As the chairman of the Broadband Committee for the interim committee, the subcommittee, I appreciate you for coming down here to my district. And you've come many of times before. You've toured Harris Stowe once before, especially when we're talking about agriculture and what we can do with the STEM program. But to come back and try to address another issue as far as broadband and equity. Like I said before, this is what unity looks like. This is what change looks like, and this is how we make it happen. So for myself, Harris Stowe family, from the family of the 79th District, we appreciate you being here. And thank you for coming out.
Thank you. And it's always an honor to be here, and the energy at Harris Stowe, I wish we had that everywhere. It's just, you guys do so many things right here. And this is all part of that, is that community engagement and the emphasis on STEM, and God bless you and keep at it.
And President Smith, thank you for allowing us to use the facility, and just being here and making sure that we do have these conversations, as they are important. As we've said before, Harris Stowe is a hub for anybody to come and get information, but also get educated. So you can do two things here. So I really appreciate it. And we appreciate the staff and everyone for being here. So thank you.